guess what? Okay, all right, Jazzy. Hello, everyone. This is my new little kitten, Jasmine Oreo, or Jazzy for short, and she just woke up from a nap, so she is just full of it, aren't you? Aren't you? She's not going to settle down. Okay, you might have to come get her now, Leroy. Can you say hi to the camera? Can you say hi to the camera? That's it. That's it. Say hello. Say hello. And she's already a camping kitty. She's already learning how to camp. Okay, there you go.
Star of the show.
Yep, star of the show. Thanks for letting me do that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Uranus and Gemini. I'm calling it an update because I did do a webinar on Uranus and Gemini a couple of years ago, back in 2023. And so let's get ourselves started here. So give me a moment to get out of a few things and I'll get my slides going. Whoops, wait a minute. I gotta share. Okay. Hold on. I'm learning how to do Zoom. Okay, so share that. Okay, Leroy, will you tell me that I actually have
Yep,
uh
you're up and
okay,
running. Yep.
okay. So okay, I'm getting a little some things out of the way for me as we get started. All right, everybody. I think I'm ready to go here. Let's see if, yep, we are doing it. And so here's our housekeeping slide that I always have in here, the various places you can go on our website. And I have been calling this decade the Great Ingress Decade because, as you can see on your screen, we have the four outer planets, including Chiron in this group, changing signs in a 4-year time period. This is very rare. Sometimes we'll have two, maybe once in a while three, but to have four of them all change signs within 4 years is very again kind of rare. Sorry, our doorbell's ringing. I think Leroy's gonna go get it and tell them we're working, whoever it is. And so you can see here, Pluto in Aquarius 20 years, Neptune in Aries 14, Uranus in Gemini is 7, and Chiron in Taurus will be 7 years as well. So when these planets change signs, it creates quite a bit of change for all of us individually and for all kinds of groups of people on out to all species on planet Earth having to shift with these changes. I'll give more on that in a little bit, but I also want to just point out, as I've been doing on these Ingress webinars, that we have quite a few aspects that are going to be coming along here over the next 5 to 7 years, as you can see on your screen. I'll have more on those too in a minute. But first of all, let's just take a look at Gemini, Uranus in Gemini. The world as a whole, individual countries, and each individual must balance Gemini, flexibility, and standing on principle. So when do we have to adapt and change? And when do we, Gemini, make a choice and stand for what we believe, for what we think, for how we want to live our life? We also are going to be dancing between true or I just read it off from the screen. The interesting dance determining truth from words. Uranus in Gemini is just going to overwhelm us with information and words and what's fact and what's alternative fact. What's a lie? What's the truth? We're all going to have to work with that Sagittarius polarity to intuit for us where that truth is. One of the biggest themes we're going to get from Uranus and Gemini is to expect the unexpected. In other words, with Gemini, we can be going along. One moment we're fine, and the next moment everything's topsy-turvy. You pick the area of life. It can be all over the place. Now, I have been putting in these slides and these ingress webinars because from the Jeffrey Wolf Green method of EA, not all souls are in the same state of awareness. We call these evolutionary states, and you can see on your screen here, consensus, individuated, and spirituated. And the thing that I always point out is that these evolutionary states of consciousness within our souls are not better than or less than. As you can see by example on your screen, they're expanding states of awareness and consciousness through lifetimes and lifetimes of experience, reincarnation. Evolutionary states are not known by the chart alone. You have to observe and correlate it. You have to observe and correlate it. And sometimes it can take a while. But if you just kind of reflect on people you know in your life, and one of the easiest places to do it is sometimes within our family of origins. You know, the quote unquote black sheeps, they're usually those that are expanding into individuating and spirituating and not quite buying into the consensus norms of any given family. Grocery stores, post office, you know, I like to say you can go to some of those public places and you can observe those evolutionary states all around you. Now, because approximately 70% of souls, any planet, on the planet, any country, any race, are consensus, this is the majority that makes the decisions. They create our norms, our taboos, our laws, our religions, and it is also sometimes why evolution can take a long time period, because evolution, or excuse me, consensus consciousness just wants to be secure. And so here are the specific dates that Uranus is in Gemini. It goes in for 4 months. It's going to dip back into Taurus there, as you can see on your screen, for almost 5 months back into Taurus. And then it will go into Gemini for 6 years. Uranus around the zodiac, it's an 84-year cycle, pretty much evenly divided with a transit through each of the 12 signs, approximately 7 years. So here we are, Uranus in Gemini this year 25, all the way through 3033, as you see on your screen. Uranus moving into Gemini for 7 years is setting the stage for the great three pattern makers, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, to harmonize in air and fire signs. Air is mental, fire is spirit. They are both the active polarity, energy moving out. And so our senses are just going to be on overload. And Uranus rules the brain, and it rules dendrites. And dendrites are the little areas of the brain where we store information, short-term memory, long-term memory, even far memory of past lives, what we can access in, past regression or hypnotherapy. And so we are going to be actively creating new dendrites over these next 7 years with Uranus, just trying to keep abreast with all of the information that's going to come out, with all of the technological advancements. Uranus rules technology in general. All of that stuff, we're going to have to try and keep pace with it and make sense of it and figure out how it is going to fit in our life and how our life is going to adapt to vast amounts of information coming at us faster, faster, faster. We're already starting to watch places where machines and AI, artificial intelligence, is going to outpace us in expanding our minds. For instance, after this webinar is done, AI gives me a synopsis immediately. And I think Leroy's been posting that in the description for this webinar on our YouTube channel. So you can have that if you want to download it or print it out. And hopefully we're all going to be able to keep up with this fast-paced energy of Uranus and Gemini. Now, I just wanted to work with Uranus, Aquarius, 11th house, and EA. That's one archetype. It is known as the individuated unconsciousness, our own unconscious mind. And it contains three types of information. Past in all its detail, this life, past lives. We can access it again through various ways, as you see on your screen. It contains everything we suppress in the present with Saturn. I don't want to deal with this uncomfortable issue with a family member. I'm just going to ignore all this debt from a medical bill that I have. When we don't want to deal with it, we try to push it into the unconsciousness. Uranus is always pushing it back up. Also, this archetype contains the blueprints of the future. Clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. Coming up once or twice, fantasy thinking, fantasy wishful thinking way down the road a decade from now. But if it comes up, future orientated message all on its own, again, it's where your own soul is trying to go in the next few months, in the next year. And so when we have a Uranus aspect in our chart, or in this case with Uranus going into Gemini and Mercury, Gemini, third house is our left brain, we have to try and make sense out of all of this. And so we are tasked with discerning whether something is past, present, or future orientated all at once. And if it's from our past, we want to detach Uranus, understand it, and break free or heal it however we need to. If it's something about the present, it's don't stuff it. You've got to bring it up, address it, use that Gemini curiosity and inquisitiveness to process through and get to the other side of it. And if it's those blueprints of the future, how are you meant to move forward? What steps are you meant to do to change your life, Gemini, to have some of that flexibility, doing something differently than you have before? So here again, our own individuated unconsciousness is going to be tasked with exploring, Gemini, new ways of living our life, Gemini. We can have confusion show up because there's too much to process. We just get into overwhelm. And so this is sometimes where we have that Sagittarius polarity come through, where we need downtime and we need to allow that intuition to work, and sometimes work below the surface, Uranus, to then pop the information up to us. One of the most common things that can happen with Uranus and Gemini is what we call brain switching, going back and forth, left brain, right brain, left brain logic, right brain intuition. And we can go back and forth and it can just get so confusing. Jeffrey Green's quote, Uranus and Gemini, it is necessary for the intuitive right brain to guide the intellectual left brain. You like my little philosophical quote here? You should sit in meditation for 20 minutes a day, unless you're too busy. Then you should sit for an hour. I thought that was a cute one. So Uranus is the archetype of trauma. And trauma can be in this life, it can be past lives, and it's an intense disturbance caused by a shocking event or stress. It can be spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and it tends to have a lasting effect on us. And suppressed trauma Remember, Saturn trying to suppress things. It can dictate subconscious behavioral reactions to little things in our life. Jeffrey Green felt that about 85 to 90% of souls are born with past life trauma, what society now calls post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Because Uranus naturally rules Aquarius 11th house, air sign, it's going into Gemini, air sign. We are going to see an increase in all kinds of mental health issues. Personality disorders, the sociopathic behaviors, neurosis, of course, the PTSD. We're just going to see that happening around us on personal levels, maybe ourselves. We're going to see it happening on collective levels in society where somebody can't handle something and they go off the deep end with a gun in the US or a bomb in another country, all kinds of different ways. And what it's going to bring up for various countries on the planet is how are we going to address our mental health as well as what we would call physical well-being? And so, what countries are going to address mental health issues on a public or social level? And what countries are going to choose to blame the individual and or its familial background, its environmental background and upbringing? The old pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Sometimes that works, but on broad levels, sometimes our societies are created in ways that makes it extremely hard. The US, I think it was the 60s and 70s when we kind of stepped away from addressing mental health issues and left it up to cities and counties and states. And all of a sudden, the homeless, I think there's something like a third of homeless people really have mental health issues, maybe more than that. I don't remember it exact. But this is going to be a major issue that we will have to address as a society. And right now, with the passage of Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, I think this issue is going to get worse as Uranus is in Gemini the next 7 years. The question is, with Pluto and Aquarius, will the rebellions come up from that? Stay tuned. We'll all live through it and we'll all find out. Now, because of this, there's going to be generations of trauma that need to be addressed as well. So, Uranus and Gemini can bring us new healing techniques. And it can also take a second look at forbidden techniques. In other words, the studies that are starting to go on in the area of psychedelics, the LSD stuff, the microdosing with mushrooms. So there'll be a variety of natural and human-made substances that we will look at for mental self-healing. This book, Drunk by Edward Slingerland, came out in, I think it was 21, right during COVID. And I finally got around to reading it in 23 when some of these slides will go back to my first talk in 23. So you'll see 2023 examples. I laughed so much through this book. It was hysterical. And it really does address the pros and cons of the whole issue of alcohol. I would recommend this book. It is just full of facts and figures and social history. But again, he does it in such a funny way. It was a fun read for me. Another little example for you is I have a client who my Scorpio energy tends to attract some Pluto and Scorpios. And I have one young woman who has Pluto conjunct the South Node in Scorpio. And she has just applied for a PhD program, and she wants to get it in studying psychedelics and the natural and the organic and the inorganic, and how we can use those in the process of dealing with death and dying. She, little Scorpio here, lots of Scorpio like me. She has spent, I don't know, maybe a decade in the undertaking world and has gotten a lot of experience for her young age. Again, that Pluto South Node conjunction in Scorpio. So I'm very curious to see if she gets accepted into her program, and watching her with her creativity. That Pluto South Node, Scorpio's in her fifth house, watching her creativity as she becomes one of those who literally, creates these new healing techniques that we're going to see through Uranus and Gemini. As you can see, Uranus rules the brain that I talked about before with its dendrites and synapses. It rules our central nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. It co-rules with Mercury, the nervous system in general. So Uranus going into Mercury sign Gemini, we can all find our nervous systems just fried. Oh, I'm going to put this in here. I had a little note that I got to write down. Jeffrey Green always said that the herb for Uranus is fo-ti root, F-O-T-I root. It's an oriental longevity herb, but it is specifically an herb for the brain and calming down the synapses that fire, and calming down the dendrites, and balancing hormonally for both men and women. It's a great herb for addressing our nervous system being fried and needing to rebalance. It's an adaptogenic, calms down the hyper, enhances the hypo. Adaptogenics are usually many times are taken as tonic herbs, which means over long periods of time, because it's a root. You either take it as a capsule, like to me, herbal capsules are food, or you take it as an extract with alcohol or glycerin if you can't do alcohol. Not best as teas, but this is something that you could find very helpful for yourself, and you have to do muscle testing to see how much you need. Sometimes you will need more than what the bottle says. The bottles always say take 2. I don't know how much Leroy takes, but he's a third house Pluto, Gemini soul. I've had him on fo-ti root for a long period of time. And so again, you want to test that. Now, Gemini is going to add some flexibility to Uranus. Uranus is fixed air. Aquarius 11th house is the fixed modality. So that Gemini energy will allow us to make change a little easier if we make the effort. Joe Dispenza was the person that I heard first say, "What fires together, wires together." Uranus and Gemini is going to be an excellent time period to rewire, to do it differently, to change how those synapses spark and rewire mental patterns in our brain, especially if we make the effort. And then that allows us to make whatever changes we are trying to make in our world as we are evolving and growing. And of course, one of the things that's going to happen is, by the way, I'm seeing my screen go up and down. So if any of you attending live have questions, just a reminder, Leroy, if you'll watch the chat box and interrupt me for any questions. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but these slides will be in as a PDF in our description of this webinar on YouTube. And so Uranus in Gemini is going to explode technological advances. All of a sudden, AI came on the scene when Uranus went in, excuse me, when Pluto went into Aquarius in 23 and 24. And now it's just gangbusters, full speed ahead. Uranus going into Gemini is going to accelerate that even more. And it's going to behoove us to again pay attention to what's fact and what's real, because we can have a lot of miscommunications out there, accidental and deliberate, and it can create unexpected wars. So, in other words, we can have physical war, but we can also have social media wars, through propagandas. If you're paying any attention to news, you'll notice that Jeffrey Epstein, who was arrested and, as far as I know, committed suicide in jail, he was arrested on pedophile charges. And of course, there's a great big elite A list that's, had Republicans up in the air for several years now. They want to see those names. Of course, they want to see the Democrat elite names. Democrats want to see the Republican elite names, Donald Trump being one of them. A long, long, long history with Epstein. And so, just an example of how we're just going to have various issues and events that explode in consciousness, and some of them just going off on a tangent that has nothing to do with reality. And so, how do we keep ourselves grounded? Sag intuition again, through all of this overload of information and chaos. We're going to continue to see all kinds of devices become smaller and smaller and more powerful. China is leading the process to take all these different software applications and putting them together into one application. That's something you can go do a little bit of research for your own. In other words, we don't have a Facebook account and an Instagram account and this account and that account. It's like one software account. Pros and cons to that. Here again, will we have various countries force big tech monopolies to break up? Will we ask or force monopolies in other areas, other industries to break up as well? There's such a concentration of where our food comes from right now that would be wonderful if it went back into the direction of local farms, which again, Trump administration is trying to reverse all the grants the Biden administration put out there to support the local foods and farms movements. We all have to learn how to work through this technology train, keeping yourself going with it as best as you can through your wise years in the autumn of your life. Or if you've got nieces and nephews like we do, or you have grandchildren that can do it for you, hallelujah, let them do it. So debates will intensify around social media's impact upon influencing the public. And with Uranus in Gemini, how it is affecting the mental health, especially of all these younger souls who are like this all the time. And, you know, starting to be more and more documentation on how it is affecting their mental health and decreasing their mental resilience. Which countries are going to regulate it? In 23, the EU fined Facebook 1.3 billion for data privacy violations. Not heard anything about it lately. I would imagine that Facebook has appealed it and is going through it. We do know that here in the US, we lag behind any types of social media regulation. Now, on a positive note here, with all of the technology and AI and social media, we have an ability to self-educate in giant leaps. In other words, it's going to be harder for authoritarian countries to stop the public from receiving information. And we also, though, have to use our Sagittarian intuition to help us determine what's truth and what's biased and what's an outright lie. But Gemini is learning. It is active polarity and curiosity. And so I see education just exploding in different ways of how we will learn with AI, without AI, but how much of it we can just learn ourselves. You know, Google's a verb. You know, anything going on in your world, how many times do we pick up our phone and Google something? I bet you I do it a couple times a day, and sometimes even more. I prep for a webinar like this and I just Google a word and its definition, and then I go to Google and see how much it can give me about that situation or word. So it will allow more of us to be aware of this world we live in. And in some ways, again, I think it's a good thing. Now, when we're confronted, one more screen before I get to that. UFOs. When I did this first lecture in 2023, there was a whole bunch of UFO stuff that was coming out, and they wanted files released and et cetera, et cetera. I think Uranus in Gemini is going to add to the picture, along with their waxing trines, Uranus to Gemini. That's going to add to the picture. As we go through the next 20 years of Pluto and Aquarius, the next 7 years of Uranus and Gemini, will we figure out we are not alone in the universe? Stay tuned. We could see major debates arise periodically from time to time over this. And these other entities, are they friends or foes? We're not going to know until they present themselves. And chances are they'll be more advanced than us. And if they're a foe, fighting from country to country is going to look pretty asinine when we've got a much bigger issue or fight on our hands. Stay tuned. This whole issue is a little unsettling, exciting maybe for some, but it's so, for me, it's a little unsettling. It's like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this. But as we move ourselves into the Aquarian age, we don't have an exact date on when it's coming, but we're transitioning into it. We're going to have the issues with AI to take care of. Well, the AI try to control us. And we're also going to have the whole thing of unidentified flying objects, UFOs. So, I'm one of the other basics with any planet, but this is also quite germane to Uranus because it's that, Uranus is that process to individuate, to break free, be uniquely who we are. So we have three reactions to change when Uranus and Gemini bring something into our world. We can resist change. We want to cling to the past. That's a Saturn reaction. We can embrace the change in whatever way and just go full steam ahead. That's a Uranus reaction. The typical reaction is a mixture of both, willing to change in some ways, resisting change in other ways for security reasons. This is a mixture of Saturn and Uranus. So we will do this individually, we will do this collectively. So we will see some areas of life go through major evolution and progress. We'll see other areas of life regress. Look at what Donald Trump's bill is going to do to healthcare in the US and Medicaid. I got more on that for you in a little bit. If you're talking, Leroy, you're muted. I'm thinking I'm hearing him from the other room. And if not, okay.
I was just getting Jazzy O off the countertops.
Yeah, we're teaching her that she can't be on the kitchen counter. And so, for those of you who don't have cats, one of the ways you do that is a spray bottle of water. And it tends to work. So, she's on a learning curve, at least when we are in the house, okay? So, we're just coming off of 15 years of Pluto in Capricorn. And with these changes that we can just sense coming on socially, technology, health and wellness, and politically, we have got a lot of the current powers, and especially Republicans with Donald Trump, just taking so many of our social systems backwards. There are time periods where it's literally been Capricorn depressing for me. And I have to do that Aquarius detachment and just go look at the bigger picture. Look at the broad expansions of how we have evolved over the last 100 years, over the last 500. It'll be ways, but we have a tendency to usually evolve as slow as it takes through the consensus world. I think that these Pluto and Aquarius rebellions will sooner or later catch on. Next year in 2026, transiting Pluto will go over the USA South Node in Aquarius. And I've said that's probably the initiations of some of these rebellions starting to really take place. How will Uranus in Gemini impact communicating the underhandedness that is going on? The richest cabinet in a presidential history of billionaires giving themselves $1 trillion tax break. Why we take $1 trillion away from healthcare in the United States. Stay tuned. We will see how that turns out. Now, just a couple comments on the Sagittarius polarity. Uranus is one of the outer planets that goes retrograde 5 months a year, or 44% of the time. And so when we have Uranus in Gemini retrograde, the intent with the Sag polarity is to surrender to our right brain or intuitive thought. We got to step away from all the chaos and all this stuff coming through us. And many times, because Sagittarius relates to natural laws and nature itself, it can mean that finding ourselves in nature or going out in nature or turning off the TV or turning off the electronics, that can give us our downtime to allow that intuition to tap in and bring through the answers of what it is we need to know. And then it's also a time period for balancing left brain, right brain. And it points towards the right brain being able to have the bottom line. It is a time period to search for the deeper philosophical meanings of life or any subject that we find ourselves having to deal with. And all these technological advances, they need to be organized, they need to be regulated into societal frameworks that are supportive of us. And that 5-month time period, Uranus retrograde, the Sag polarity, is when we can get the ahas on how we do want to regulate technology. Because ultimately, technology needs to serve spirituality. And I say technology has to honor all species on the planet as well. So again, those 5 months when Uranus is retrograde, you really want to honor your intuition and you really want to just allow it to blossom for you. And it will help calm down that nervous system chaos that we can be going through. Again, Uranus in Gemini, one moment everything is fine, and the next moment it's chaos. Well, one of the things with the polarity of Gemini and Sag, Gemini is breath in, and it's literally taking information in. Sagittarius is breath out. And that's how we make sense of everything. So when your world is in chaos and your nervous system is stressed or fried, just calming yourself down with simple breath work is one of the best things you can do with Uranus and Gemini. Breath in, breath out. Breath in, breath out. Breath in, 1, 2, 3. Breath out, 1, 2, 3. Calm yourself down. All right, we'll look at more things about this transit. However, just a little bit of looking back to the last time Uranus was in Gemini in the early to late 40s of the last century. So look at this one. The last cycle, Uranus in Gemini, World War II. The cycle before that, the USA Civil War. The cycle before that, the USA Revolutionary War. Whew. Take a deep breath on that one. I'll come back to this slide, but let me just jump forward for you. The USA Civil War took place in 1861 through 1865. It was literally the last time that Neptune was in Aries. If you're not aware of it, Neptune went into Aries. What was it? June 2nd, I think it was. It's going to retrograde back into Pisces, then go into Aries again for 14 years. The second to last time, again, Uranus was in Gemini. The Civil War, 620,000 deaths in our country when the North and South fought each other. Oh boy, let's see what happens with progressive and conservative movements this time around with Neptune in Aries and Uranus in Gemini. Pray for peace. Back to the last time again, World War II. The Holocaust saw the extermination of 6 million Jews by gas chambers, and now we have conservative movements trying to say it was a hoax. One of the controversies that happened during that time period, a gentleman named Hans Asperger's really started to figure out the autism spectrum. Asperger's syndrome is high functioning mentally on that autism spectrum. And he did his work on that during Uranus and Gemini. Positives, negatives, you can go research more details on that if you want. Anne Frank wrote her diary, Uranus and Gemini. We dropped the Hiroshima uranium atomic bomb, Uranus and Gemini. Albert Hoffman self-administered LSD for the first time. I think he did it accidentally. IBM did its early prototypes of a calculator. Ballpoint pens, last time Uranus was in Gemini. Dead Sea Scrolls became public. And here's one for you. We had the International General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is GATT. I think it's pronounced GATT. You know, here we are, one Uranus in Gemini cycle later, and Donald Trump is wanting to create all kinds of chaos. They say that to date, since he's implemented his first tariffs and we've been going forward the last few months, there, what did somebody, I can't remember where I read this. I think it's somewhere like $1 billion in tariff fees have been collected by the US Treasury. Oh, and by the way, in case you didn't know this, those tariff fees were paid by US businesses as they imported either items, products, or parts to make products. And that stuff is starting to be passed along to the general public. I think this is going to be something that we're going to hear in the news more and more throughout 25, throughout 2026 with Uranus and Gemini. And we're going to start getting the facts on the increase in this price and that price. Stay tuned. You might want to really prioritize your budgets. So, looking forward with some of our aspects that are going to go on with Uranus and Gemini. Here's the first ingress into Gemini that happened on July 7th. This is what we call a splash pattern, where the planets are just all over the place around the circle. That means we have energy going in several different directions. Uranus, Gemini, open-mindedness, but also scatteredness. We see that we have the moon in Sag opposing Uranus-Venus conjunction in Gemini. This is going to intensify the brain switching, left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain of Uranus and Gemini. It also means, like I said before, we are going to want to clarify what we value most in life. That Venus-Uranus conjunction, we are going to have to simplify our values, to simplify our budgets as things increase with prices, at least here in the US, probably elsewhere as well, due to the tariffs. Now, you can see on your screen here that Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, include Venus if you want, are making their sextiles and trines already. Here we have right now Uranus 5 waxing sextiles to Neptune, 5 waxing trines to Pluto, and of course Neptune-Pluto has 13 more waxing sextiles. You want more on this aspect? I did a Neptune in Aries webinar that is on our YouTube channel, Evolutionary Astronet. You can go refer to that if you would like to. So these sextiles and trines are kind of more or less dominating most of this chart. A few other aspects, but those are the ones that we are looking at. I have been using the Munchausen USA chart with a Virgo rising, a fifth house Pluto, egocentrical. If you're new to hearing me say this, you can refer to this screen later, and you can also refer to this PDF file down here that recaps Michael Munchausen's research on this. Here is the Munchausen chart with the Uranus ingress for the first one. And look what we have happening or happened on July 7th, right after the USA birthday, solar return. We have a Jupiter return. We have a Sun return. And I looked at that and I went, whoa, how much does nationalism return to the USA? There's a difference to me. I've read about this, nationalism versus patriotism. Nationalism is me, my country, us versus them. We're the exceptional country, fifth house Pluto. Whereas a patriotism is more of being supportive of your country, but you don't have to be so much into the us versus them. However, with this Jupiter Sun returns in with this ingress chart, how protectionistic is the USA going to be? I use the dollar as an example because all over the world, the dollar is used as the medium of exchange between countries. As Donald Trump creates more chaos, if he replaces Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, with a yes man or yes woman, it will really expand interest rates and inflation because other countries will not trust the independence of the Federal Reserve anymore. And so this is a real danger that we might run into on the next few years. Take other subjects, take all of we want things to be built in the USA. You can't build plants overnight. Sometimes you can't, we cannot grow bananas in this country. We cannot grow enough coffee that we drink in this country. We can do little bits of it, but not enough. And so here is that protectionism of Cancer that can create some chaos for us, that can exacerbate Jupiter inflation and price increases. We also have a USA Uranus return coming again. Remember I said the Revolutionary War happened with Uranus in Gemini? There you go, folks. So we're going to have 3 Uranus returns in this country in 27, 28. Do we heal our political splits, or do we degrade into even more extreme cultural wars? I don't know. Stay tuned. We're all, most of us are going to live through it. There's more going on, but time-wise, I'll leave you to look at some of these things yourself. Here's those dates again. Here's your reminder. The last 3 times Uranus was in Gemini, the USA was involved in real wars. Stay tuned. Pray for peace, as I say. Globally, how will autocratic versus democratic countries duke it out? In other words, will we, degrade ourselves into more and more of an autocratic country with, Donald Trump and all of his minions just being yes, yes, yes. And who cares if you're breaking the law? How much can they get away with? We'll find out. Rare earth mineral wars are going to really take place. By the way, I live in the Northern Plains in western South Dakota in a little mountain range called the Black Hills. It is, as the crow flies, if you could drive it in a car, or fly it in an airplane maybe, or go faster though. But I like to say, well, our mountain range is about an hour wide and about 2 hours long. But it is one of the most minerally diverse areas on the planet. We have scientists and geologists come from all over. We don't have diamonds, and we don't have, there's another one we don't have, but otherwise you can think of a mineral and we've got it. Well, it just so happens this is something put in place by the Biden administration. It's one of the few things that the Trump administration has not reversed. Over the next couple of months, the USGS, the Geological Society, is flying planes low. We're doing LIDAR, LIDAR. Go Google that one if you need to. That's where it's kind of like a magnetic resonating below the Earth's surface. They are going to fly all over the Black Hills in South Dakota, Wyoming, looking for rare earth mineral deposits. And I'm like, oh, great. I mean, we've had uranium controversies in our southern hills going on where they want to mine uranium. We, up until 25 years ago, I think it was, had the deepest gold mine in the Western Hemisphere, the Homestake gold mine. And by the way, that got turned into a neutrino research facility, going gun ho with, trying to find neutrinos and trying to be a part of creating nuclear fusion, which means that energy works like the sun and we don't have the toxic waste of nuclear fission that we use now with nuclear power. But I'm like, oh, great. So we're going to be mining rare earth minerals in the Black Hills. Stay tuned. We will see how that happens. And of course, one more time, how are these progressive versus conservative factions going to duke it out within our country? When we had the Civil War, it was the North versus the South. We've got these pockets of blue states, red states, and they're not, necessarily geographically distinct. Yes, you can see a lot of red in the middle with the blue streaks on the coastal regions, but it's still pockets here and there that are going on, and they may change during Uranus in Gemini. Stay tuned. We'll see how that turns out with, red states, blue states wanting to gerrymander their states to, not let the other side have any elected representatives to Congress. Here, Donald Trump's chart, and he was born with Uranus in Gemini during that last cycle. So Uranus he's going to have his Uranus returns in 29. Will he leave office? He's going to oppose his moon in 30, conjunct North Node, oppose South Node in 30, and he'll have one conjunction to the sun in 2031. Will we see through Uranus in Gemini an increase in dementia for him? Again, remember, Uranus rules mental health, and Uranus in Gemini can create the chaos of mental issues and the explosion of mental health issues. Will Donald Trump be part of that? What did he do? He just turned 79 years old. How erratic will his decisions be? And just in case you're interested, in addition to the Uranus conjunctions coming along in a few years, in 27, he's going to have a Neptune opposition. In 28, 29, he is going to have 5 Neptune last quarter squares to his Mercury in Cancer, 11th house Mercury. Again, brain deterioration from age, the possible increase of dementia issues and confusion issues. And then in 2030, he's going to have his Pluto opposition. So he's got some pretty major aspects that are going to be coming along. Not everybody gets a Pluto opposition. Not everybody gets a Neptune opposition. Not everybody gets a Uranus conjunction coming along in your 80s. Stay tuned. So here's my little slides that I was just going to tell you. So far, he has been paid roughly $500 million by these various companies to settle with him rather than taking things to court. Wall Street Journal that just published some information on his birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein when he turned 50. I do not see Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal settling. They're going to take him to court because they got the facts. And the Wall Street Journal is well known. It tends to go conservative, but I think Murdoch's tired of Trump. They don't publish something unless they have every single I dotted and T crossed. I think they're going to be the organization that goes to court, and that means Donald Trump will have to sit down for a deposition. And again, Trump's suing them. So even as president, he can make this court case continue forward. How much you want to bet he doesn't pull a Gemini? Oh, let it go and, quietly try and dismiss the lawsuit because he doesn't want those facts to come out. Stay tuned. That big, beautiful bill, the tax cuts go into effect right away. However, they are not going to have those new paperwork requirements on Medicaid until 2028. So they're delaying the effects of taking $1 trillion away from Medicaid and pushing it onto the states to find the money to pay for it. They're delaying that till after the midterms, so that they can hopefully get through the midterms without losing control of the Senate and the House. And I think they're definitely going to lose control of the House, and it's possibly going to be the Senate if the Democrats can hammer all of this home fast enough. Stay tuned. Okay, here we are with those aspects that I was talking about. First of all, when we look at Uranus, Pluto, they had their conjunctions in the middle 60s in Virgo. What we are looking at through Uranus in Gemini is the first quarter trines and the gibbous phase sesqui squares. There's the visual. Here's the dates. There are 5 of those waxing trines. There are 7 of those waxing sesqui squares that are going to take place. Some of them will be Uranus moving into Cancer. So we've got some pretty heavy duty Uranus Pluto aspects. The trines, first of all, as a planetary pair, this is the soul's evolution of its individuated unconsciousness. How we, on a soul level, are evolving our unconsciousness. How are we making things conscious to liberate, to evolve our souls? Trines in general are rewards of prior efforts, both positive and negative. Some issues progress, some issues static or regress. Any lack of progress, those entrenched patriarchal distortions. I have some concerns about these Uranus-Pluto trines and the conservative movements just being able to destroy even more social support systems. We'll find out. The one counteraction to that is Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus' own sign. It can empower progress. Uranus Aquarius 11th house can be the elites and the haves and have-nots, okay? But it also is rebellions. And as more people see what's happening to their pocketbooks by this US administration, those rebellions can come along. Now, these 2 planets with their waxing trines are going to explode technology and AI. And there's going to be countries and groups and peoples left behind, but it can also be massive upsets and redistributions. And those will come along when we get to those sesqui squares of the early 30s, the beginning of next decade. Okay, we're already halfway through this one. The beginning of the next decade, that's going to be the what's my left brain word? That's gonna be when we go, wait a minute. I don't know if we like what we're doing here. I think we need to have a change and turn things around. Those, again, sesqui squares, as they're being called, they're gonna, ask us to take a second look. Do we really like the directions we are going from these trines? These are big aspects. We could talk through every subject you can think of with these. Trines coming along, the ease of pulling the wool over our eyes, or whatever that phrase is, and then the sesqui squares coming along, and we go, oh, wait a minute, I don't like this. Rebellion and change. Any issue. So it's not enough to be compassionate. You must act. And Uranus and Pluto, Uranus and Aquarius is activism. Excuse me. Pluto and Aquarius is activism. And Uranus in Gemini is do. We can't just talk. We've got to do. So how is your part in the play going to come about? Something I want to show you here, okay? So we have a dilemma of creating green energy at the expense of the environment. And whatever the Trump administration is trying to send backwards, it's not going to happen across the rest of the world. And sooner or later, we are going to be playing catch up. The reversing of Biden policies that the Trump administration is doing is just handing it over to China to be the leader on that. There will still, though, be battles for controlling those resources and manufacturing as well. The rare earth minerals that I talked to you about. Every Apple iPhone contains a computer chip made in Taiwan. And Biden was doing his best to try and bring those chip manufacturings to the USA. Stay tuned. We'll see how that comes along. Cobalt is a mineral. You can see the picture up here on your screen. That is very necessary for EV batteries. And they have depleted the cobalt reserves in Congo, and they're moving everything to Indonesia at the expense of entire islands just being decimated and moving the people to somewhere else. And so we're still having issues with green energy and how we are decimating the planet. Uranus in Gemini is going to exacerbate this and increase this. And because Uranus is an air mental archetype, Gemini is an air mental archetype. Uranus has rulership of the electrical grid, and we are way behind. And with AI, we need those increases in our electrical grid. We need those increases in the data centers that Biden deliberately put in red states that Trump is trying to take away. So we can look at Uranus and Gemini creating huge blackouts in the US. And it can come from, again, physical overloads with AI technology. It can come through climate change. It can come through other countries trying to hack us and our electrical grid, which really isn't that hard to do because we are so far behind on our technologies with electrical grids. By the way, the Tennessee Valley Authority is the largest public nonprofit electrical authority, and I can't remember how many states. I want to say it's like 5 states or maybe 13 states that it is the authority for the price of electricity in the Southeast. The Trump administration is trying to privatize it. And that means energy or electricity prices will go up. And there's someone in his cabinet, one of the billionaires in his cabinet, and I want to say it's the Commerce Secretary, but I don't know for sure. He handed over his businesses to his son, so he diversified from those. But his son will be the one who will come into charge with that organization, that company, if they privatize the TVA. So stay tuned. Wait for that to show up in the news over the next year or so, and watch the right-wing news try to suppress it until they're far enough along in privatizing it. That may be a big issue. It may be one of those that blows up in their face with the public saying, no, 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 We're not having for-profit electricity. I have used these slides before, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but I want you, this was my research a few years ago with a public webinar for somebody. And this is the best I could come to birth charts for the three big fossil fuels. Coal has Uranus in Gemini. Coal's going to have a Uranus return. I think it's going to continue to decrease just with market forces, no matter what. It's had 3 Uranus cycles now. It's in Gemini, and so it's going to have its third Uranus return. So I don't think it's going to last. Gas doesn't have Uranus in Gemini, but it's got 3 planets in the south node in Gemini. Stay tuned. Will we see some major gas explosions? Will we create laws that right now, with a lot of your different oil pumping, they burn off the gas at the same time because the oil and gas can be together, and so they have these flares where they're just literally allowed to burn off the gas, and it has a huge percentage of our global warming. Will we regulate these flares and not allow oil and gas companies to do it anymore? Oil also has Uranus in Gemini. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. Let's see how these 3 fossil fuels come through Uranus in Gemini over the next 7 years. Will we really understand their role in climate change and see their decrease? Stay tuned. Satellite chaos. Elon Musk, who's not very popular right now. This slide is from my first lecture in 23. He plans to put 40,000 Starlink satellites into space. He had 1,600 of them in 23. 2 years down the road, I don't know what the count is. I haven't had a chance to look, but we're already starting to talk about the debris and light pollution that's coming from all these satellites out there in space. I happen to live in a dark Earth area, and we easily go camping in the Black Hills, and there's nothing but the Milky Way and the stars. But we are noticing those satellites more and more and more. Uranus in Gemini happens to be coming along during that 11-year solar maximum. Haven't heard too much about solar flares in the last couple of months. However, how will Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini, disrupt through geomagnetic storms the power grid again? Cell phone, radio, satellite, GPS. Stay tuned. We will live through it, and the possibility of major disruptions coming along is definitely there. Here is Uranus and Neptune. They had conjunctions back in 93 between 18 to 20 degrees Capricorn, and they are in process of getting ready to make their waxing crescent phase sextiles. Here's the dates for you: 25, 26, 27, 5 of them. I look at their 172-year cycle as spiritual evolution and societal revolutions. They had a conjunction in the 1820s in Capricorn, And that was when we really had an increase in the Industrial Revolution. And many, many people ended up leaving their farm life and cities, and the Industrial Revolution displaced many people in the cities, losing their jobs, etc. Well, these 93 conjunctions, I've been calling them the technological revolution. Our computers, our cell phones, all of our appliances are now smart appliances with digital components that have to be replaced for, $100 or hundreds of dollars. I've had to do it twice so far with my 6-year-old washing machine components. These crescent sextiles, yin energy. It's a struggle to review and sustain whatever we were creating at the new beginnings of the conjunctions. So, how are we managing all of these technological advancements that have come from just Neptune and Uranus? Now, on a positive note, we can actualize our individuality from our deepest levels of beliefs. Or, in other words, Neptune's imagination can spark Uranian genius. There are going to be things coming out that we just don't even recognize right now between these two planets. How do we keep up? The broadest intent is for science technology to again serve natural spiritual laws and principles. However, we have to demand it. Science will race ahead with no thoughts of morality. We will see with these waxing sextiles that religious denial of science is harder and harder to maintain. What do we have with conservatives going on? They are just trying to take scientific advancements backwards. They're, trying to take the gay movement and same-sex marriage backwards. We have had two-spirit souls, as our natives call them. We've had two-spirit souls as long as we have had human beings. Just because you want to deny it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So we're going to have big debates with these waxing sextiles over all of these technological issues and how it impacts us in every area of our life. Some ways we'll move forward again, other ways we're not going to be able to. And consensus societies tend to play catch up with our beliefs as technology outpaces it. They want to ignore natural laws and have dominion over nature. And they're going to face the consequences of nature having the last word through climate change. So while we have many opportunities to advance the ability to feed all of us and to take care of the health of all of us, do we have the will to do it? This is what Uranus, Neptune are going to explore. And so all over the world, we're almost going to be in two different worlds, Uranus, Gemini. Those who are moving towards peace and sustainability, and those who continue to want to war over territory and or religious disputes. Neptune in Aries will force compromises due to finite livable spaces, resources, and climate change events. We're going to have these democratic versus autocratic societies continuing to go back and forth with each other. Will we literally fight wars, again, Uranus and Gemini, or will they be figurative this time around through social media? It is possible that there can be majorities in various countries and regions that realize that we've got to start making some extreme choices for the planet to survive. And of course, the younger ones realize this as they grow up to be in politics. Will they make the changes? Stay tuned, we'll find out. I put this one in a lot as technology advances. Remember, you are the most brilliant creation, and we can save the planet. So here's just a slide with all of them together for you to refer to. Couple more. Here is Uranus with Saturn. Saturn is making waning sextiles with Uranus, waning semi-squares, one waning semi-sextiles, leading to a conjunction between them early next decade at 28 degrees Gemini. This is a 45-year cycle creating the transformations of our consciousness. It's the interface of the individuated consciousness Saturn and individuated unconsciousness Uranus. The purpose of this planetary pair is to decondition all the consensus conditioning patterns Saturn. It's liberating consciousness into our own unique individual nature. Now, because these aspects are last quarter and balsamic phase, this cycle is breaking down. It's the last quarter of the cycle. And so there's structures of collective consciousness that are breaking down and that are no longer working. And so denial of climate change does not prevent climate events. Talk to the people in Texas. Climate events could be exacerbated with failures as society is not taking care of its citizens. The FEMA mismanagement. Kristi Noem was my governor until she became the head of whatever, Homeland Security. Donald Trump giving the FEMA resources to red states and yet still not giving FEMA resources to California for the forest fires that they had in last February. So we'll also very easily see decimation of U.S. social support systems that will create harrowing news cycles of disease and deaths. Will the masses rise up and change it? Stay tuned. I think as time goes by, this theme of tax the rich will become more and more prominent. And I am just hoping progressive groups and Democrats will hammer this home throughout 25 and 26 as the consequences of the big, beautiful bill take place. Quickly, I put this one in. Violence is a method by which the ruthless few can subdue the passive many. Nonviolence is a means by which the active many can overcome the ruthless few. A quote from Jonathan Shell. Here is Jupiter. Jupiter had a conjunction to Uranus last spring in late Taurus. I put in its oppositions to Saturn, of which there will be 5 the beginning of the next decade, because they're going to happen at the same time. Jupiter has 3 oppositions to Uranus. Most of these oppositions will take place when Jupiter goes through Sagittarius. Jupiter-Uranus is a 14-year cycle expanding our conscious belief systems. Here's where we learn how to integrate societal and technological advancements. Integrate is a Jupiter word. Jupiter is how we make sense of things. It's how we process things and then integrate them into some type of philosophical understandings. So with Uranus, it's how do we integrate our understandings of technology? Jupiter also has rulership of legal philosophies that become laws. And when Jupiter has these oppositions to Saturn and Uranus in its own sign, Sagittarius, we're going to have new laws. Will we progress or regress? This is 5, 6, 7 years away. Stay tuned. We shall find out. The end of Jupiter's oppositions to Saturn and Uranus come then with a Saturn-Uranus conjunction in 32, late Gemini, when it starts a brand new 45-year cycle between the two of them. So, those Jupiter-Sagittarius oppositions will bring to a head the need for the philosophical foundations to manage our rapidly changing societies and the planet itself. What is truth? What is lies? Will the world get along or create World War III? What belief systems evolve towards natural spiritual principles, Jupiter Sagittarius, or sink into further dogmas, Jupiter Sagittarius? How will we adapt to a changing climate, Jupiter Sagittarius? Oh, and by the way, 8 men have more money than 4 billion people combined. A single mom using food stamps is not the problem, coming from the big, beautiful bill. And so, exhausted, overwhelmed, knowledge is forewarned and forearmed. It is up to each of us to be in the world what we wish to see in the world. Many, 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 many moons ago, I created this mantra. You can replace me with you. You can replace me with us. Spirit of God, Goddess, come through me. Mind of God, Goddess, speak through me. Heart of God, Goddess, love through me. Body of God, Goddess, I am. I've used this for, I think, 3 decades, maybe 4. Don't remember. But it used to be my mantra before I would do a session, a reading with a client. Nowadays, I just invoke it energetically before a session. Used to be what I would say before I do a webinar. Now I just invoke it energetically. I share it with you to use. If you use it publicly, just give me some credit, please, okay? All right, that's it. We're going to go down to the last few slides. Again, Evolutionary Astronet, our YouTube channel. Here's my Neptune in Aries webinar if you want to refer to it. Here's the Saturn in Aries webinar if you want to refer to it. Both have a lot of information in them. So I'm just going to see if we have any questions or comments from anybody. And as I check in for questions and comments, I stuck these slides in at the end in case we got some new beginning people to astrology and you want to know just a little bit about Uranus astronomy. You can check these out. And then here's some of the Uranus mythology. I'm not really an expert on astrological mythology. It's just not been my interest, but there was a point somewhere along the time period where I actually looked these up. And then I loved this slide as well, my last one. Because Saturn between 2020 and 2032 is actually having conjunctions to the four outer planets. Neptune 26, Chiron 28, and then Uranus in 32. So, evolution of our physical world with these planets. Okay, that is the last of my slides. I am going to take a little look at the chat pane.
Hey, I got something for you, Kim. Uh,
Okay.
Sherry would like to kind of converse with you a little bit. We don't want to go down too far on the rabbit hole because you've done plenty of work tonight, but she has a question about cryptocurrency, Uranus and Gemini. Go ahead, Sherry.
Thanks so much, KimMarie. How are you? It's so nice to see you. And thank you.
Uh,
I always love your stuff. I have two questions, and one is just in general, Uranus being technology and changes. Um, I'm just thinking that the Trump administration has obviously moved so much more towards cryptocurrency. Obviously, he's been enriching himself, but there are, a lot of inferences that perhaps the US government might shift into cryptocurrency as, I guess, part of our federal coffer. So I'm wondering if you see anything in that realm potentially happening.
so there are positives and negatives of crypto, and I've done a couple of webinars on it. If you go to our YouTube channel, there I did a webinar called The Public Banking Revolution. The Public Banking Revolution. It's right there. You can go listen to it where I go through the pros and cons of crypto a little bit more. Um, I'm a fan of public banking. I'm not the best fan of crypto. One of the things that will happen is that if we go as a country to having crypto reserves, it acts like a Ponzi scheme. And if you're one of the first ones in on the bottom floor, like many billionaires are, great for you. But if you're an average citizen, it's creating a lot of risk. It's creating risk for our country that we can default. It's similar to the fact that if Donald Trump pressures the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, everybody else gets scared that we will default on our debt, and it raises interest rates on government bonds. It also means then countries won't buy our government bonds. And when the rates increase on our government bonds because of the risk, it takes money away from basic services because we have to pay interest on the debt. So
Wow.
I sideways a little bit on that one for you. Okay. Because
Well, my
go ahead.
question is basically if, Uranus being a change and Gemini being a change in perspective, whether this country will move towards that or not, in your opinion. I'm hoping they don't because I understand what you've been saying, and it will essentially more than likely bankrupt the United States. So that's the basis of my question.
Yes, and that could easily be the case.
All right.
And we could go in that direction, especially if Republicans keep control of the House and Senate. We
Yeah.
could easily go in that direction because, again, we have a billionaire administration.
Right.
They're all in on that crypto, train.
Crypto
And
classroom.
yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And if they do something like bankrupt the country and let us get to that, then that public banking movement that I have promoted for almost 20 years now is really going to see a rise because the average person wants a safe place to put their money.
Sure,
And,
sure.
and and public banking, and by the way, I put it in so many webinars. I was just like, okay, Kim, maybe you shouldn't do it again. But Ellen Brown is my heroine. I say this all the time. Her book, The Banking on the People, the Public Banking Solution. I encourage everybody to get that book. She makes monetary policy so simple to understand. And she too goes through pros and cons of cryptocurrencies.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yes, I highly, highly recommend that. Now, did you have a second question then,
Good
Sherry?
question, yes, because you mentioned, I mean, a question I posed before you mentioned it, so I was glad that you did about FEMA, right? And the whole thing about climate change. I mean, obviously, I'm in total agreement with you about the fact that, climate change isn't going to stop. It's just going to increase in its severity, and more people are going to die, and eventually we're going to have to acknowledge that it's actually a scientific fact. But my question is, because of the fact that Uranus and Gemini is going to be approaching the US natal Gemini, right? And the fact that these are recurrence periods of war. So from the Revolutionary to the Civil War, and I'm thinking of the Civil War in particular, but not only that Governor Newsom had proposed this in California, right? When you mentioned that Trump has financed through FEMA states like Texas, but not California during, disasters, natural disasters. So do you think that Uranus and Gemini might portend that states might actually withhold the more money that the federal government withholds from blue states or any state that Trump decides when he wakes up that morning he doesn't like anymore, that they may actually come to that point where they will withhold those funds, and that might be a kind of recurrence of the Civil War because now we have a separation between the Union and the states. So
Yeah.
I just want to get your take on that.
I think that is something else that could come along. The state of New Jersey has also threatened to do that with Donald Trump because they send in more than they receive back. Basically, for those of you who don't know that, the blue states send more into the federal government than they receive back. The red states receive more than they send in. My red state, South Dakota, for every dollar we send into the government, we get $1.67 back.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that could easily be the Uranus Gemini Civil War this time around may not be physical. It may literally be this back and forth over how are we going to fairly share the pocketbook.
Right.
And if Donald Trump tries to go to extremes, he will push the blue states to extremes.
Right.
And
Well,
I haven't looked at Gavin Newsom's chart. But I'm like, what I've heard him say, somebody has to say it. Somebody has to stand up to the bully in the room.
right.
And so, yes, you could easily see that happen. How they would do it, I don't know, because they'd have to get we all send in our taxes as individuals. So, stay tuned. We'll see what the news Gemini brings out with what, blue states could do and how they would, withhold sending money in. I
Yeah,
don't,
I
the
thought
base,
that might push us towards something like public banking. Okay, because it's state.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, we're going to go in that direction sooner or later because the Republicans having no fiscal responsibility, we're going to get to the point where the interest on our debt is the only thing that we can pay.
Right.
We're not going to have it. And so, by the way, on a similar note, Bernie Sanders had the simple solution to Social Security. The employee doesn't have Social Security withholding after $176,000.
Right.
Why don't we up the Social Security withholding to 500,000? Why don't we up it to the first million? Why do we have a limit on it with income? And by the way, you're super rich, don't, have a W-2 form that we can take Social Security out of. But that can solve the Social Security problem. But that public banking movement, again, in our private banking system, the way it is now, the profit goes to the shareholders and the CEOs who make 300 times as much as the average worker. In public banking, okay, the shareholders are the public, and all the interest, all the profits go back to infrastructure. They go back to taking care of the elderly. They go back to building roads. And by the way, all of our public projects, the interest on a public project, when a city, a county, a state has bonds, right now, half of the bonds are interest. And if we didn't have to pay that money to private bondholders, our infrastructure projects would decrease by price in half.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
Honey, I think we need to end, and I'd like to end it on a little bit of a personal note, if you don't mind. We're going down the rabbit hole on finances here, macro finances.
okay.
We have a
That's
relatively new, there's a relatively new, a new name here on the board who wanted to ask a personal question. So I hope you don't mind, and maybe we can close with this. She has Uranus conjunct her ascendant at 13-degree Leo. Can you give her a little short quip about what she can expect?
Uranus. So we have somebody who has Uranus conjunct the ascendant at 13 degrees Leo.
And she calls herself a Gemini native. This is Susan.
Okay, well, first of all, it depends on whether that Uranus is in the 12th house or it's in the first house.
Correct.
Because if it's in the 12th house in Leo, then Uranus is frustrated. It isn't seen. It isn't heard. It can't get that Uranian Leo creativity out.
Mm-hmm.
And if that Uranus is in the first house, conjunct the ascendant in Leo, then it goes overboard. Then it can overwhelm others with that first house fiery energy exemplified by Leo as well. And it can create situations where you need to think before you act, Uranus. Because again, first house Leo wants to bust out and, be first in line, bigger, better, best. And Uranus has to slow down and actually mentally think first. So that's just the natal interpretation. And again, I don't have the rest of the chart. There could be other things that will influence that and increase or decrease other areas of the chart.
Susan, I just encourage you to go ahead and go on the website, and if you want to get an expanded look at your personal chart, just find that consultation page, and we'll get you hooked up with KimMarie. All right, so that's
okay. Medium, because before we let everybody go, do you have little girl beside you?
No, I think she got worn out here. We were multitasking with toys. She might have. I had to spray the water bottle because she got into my pulled pork on the countertop. Oh, yeah. So I think she
So
relaxed a little.
yeah, you probably saw it in the newsletter. Leroy and I got a 3-month-old tuxedo kitten, and she's just been an absolute little joy. Her name's Jasmine Oreo. We call her Jazzy-O for short, and she's already been camping with us. I decided if I was going to get one more cat, we've been catless for a little while. I was going to get a kitten that I could train to travel with us. And so that's what we're doing. So thank you everybody for letting me introduce Jazzy-O to you. All right, go to our website on YouTube, Evolutionary Astronet, if you want to find the Public Banking Revolution webinar. And that will have all three of Alan Brown's books referenced. Her website is webofdebt.com. You can go to her website and sign up for her emails. And every time she writes an article, you will get it in your inbox. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take deep breaths and be as calm as you can through the exciting ride of Uranus and Gemini. All right. Bye-bye. So I'm waiting on you, Media Monk.